You look at places like Japan and you want those same kind of beautiful wood finishes and wooden flooring. In South Africa, we don't build that way. Our building is bricks and concrete. Wood for us is extremely expensive. I love the way the Japanese build a structure, but that's not realistic. I turned my focus towards making the South African Kyudo Federation a proper organization and growing that organization within South Africa and also making it recognized around the world. I wanted other Kyudo nations and Japan, most importantly, to realize that we are serious about our Kyudo.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tokushikai Inside Look podcast. Today we're speaking with Jade Fraundorfer from Johannesburg, South Africa, and now living in Coral Springs, Florida, USA. Jade has been training for over 21 years, during which time he's achieved the rank of Yondan in Kyudo, Shodan in Karate, and EQ in Kendo. Jade was instrumental in bringing Kyudo to South Africa and founded the South African Kyudo Renmei, Kyudo Cape Town, and South African Kyudo Federation, helping the country become an official member of the International Kyudo Federation. In this wide-ranging conversation, we talk about the humble beginnings of Kyudo in South Africa, about traveling to Japan and making a good first impression, about building a dojo from the ground up, and the efforts to have South Africa Kyudo recognized internationally. Jade's individual grit and resilience in the face of incredible challenges is an inspiration and shows that an ambitious vision and unwavering belief in oneself can bring people together and lead to incredible accomplishments. So, without further ado, please enjoy this inside look with Jade Fraundorfer.
My name is Jade Fraundorfer. I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. As a youngster, I was always interested in, should I say, Oriental cultures, whether it be Chinese or Japanese. I always had this fascination and interest for it. I always found it beautiful and so much different from my own. In school, I wasn't really interested in doing what the rest of my mates did in school, play soccer and rugby and all these sorts of things. I was interested to try the martial arts. And my first experience was my mother went to the local gym where she would go and obviously do aerobics and all sorts of things. And as kids, you always get put inside the kids area there, the little gymnasium and play area. And I saw karate classes being held in one of the little halls in the private gym. And from there, it just blew my mind away. And I can remember going there with my grandmother and going for my first class. And I tell you, my gran sat there, she was smiling and laughing. She said at the end of the class that I had two left feet. And she now looks back at that first class I ever had with karate. And she's so amazed at where I've come from with those two left feet to where I am now. So that's basically how my journey started with the Japanese martial arts. And from there, I continued with my practice with karate for almost 20 years now. I still continue karate and yeah.
Okay, so you've been doing karate. What kind of drew you to Kyudo? Because I'd imagine karate, there's a lot more active movements. There might be sparring. I don't know if you're type, but it's definitely something that requires a lot more physical ability. Why Kyudo? Why something like this?
Well, when I did karate, I found kata the most beautiful thing. Yeah, fighting and kumite and going to tournaments and winning medals. Okay, you had to do it. But for me, kata was the most beautiful thing. The movement, the form, the timing, the strong, hard, soft, the dance. And if I look back now, that's Kyudo is kata. There's that breath, the form, the beauty, the movement, how all the movements tie into each other. And I think through my karate years, what eventually drew me to Kyudo is that it was like kata, which I always loved. That's kind of what drew me there.
I imagine that there probably wasn't any Kyudo in South Africa at the time. How did you learn about it? How did you discover it?
I used to go to the library quite often to get books on martial arts. I mean, in those days, we didn't have the internet like we have today and Facebook and all sorts of these things. So any kind of inspiration was, a National Geographic documentary on the TV or go to the library and get a book. And I would then go and get all these books on the Japanese martial arts on the library. And I was turning the one day in one of these books, and I saw this British Kyudoka in kimono standing in full draw in kai there with a short insert on Kyudo, and had never heard of it or seen it before. I mean, you grow up knowing about samurai and samurai swords and armor and karate, but I mean, you never heard anything about Kyudo. And that fascinated me. There was no Kyudo in South Africa. And at this stage, I was in my early teens. So without any internet like we have today and Facebook and all that, it kind of just, I remember taking a photocopy of that book, of that insert, and putting it away in my little box of trinkets, that you keep as a kid. And what started me with the Kyudo is basically the one day I just recently moved out of my parents' place, youngster starting his life new and whatever. And you leave with all your boxes and your stuff. And the one evening I was going through that little box of trinkets, and there was that photocopy that I originally took, when I was like 12, 13 years old. And there's that photocopy of that insert and that guy doing Kyudo. And by that time, Facebook was going, and you could go onto YouTube and all these things. And from there, I thought, well, hang on, you didn't find that by mistake. Let's now dive into the mat, dive into everything. And then, yes, that's how I started.
Wow, that's amazing. So you hadn't really thought about it since that time, and it was just tucked away. And then you just luck had it that you opened that box and you saw it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so now you found it and you can now go online and you can see more about this. But then how were you able to start practicing it?
Yeah, that was quite a difficult thing. Obviously, just coming out of the house and starting your first job. And now, in those days, you needed equipment. And what equipment do you need? How do you get a hold of that equipment? I was lucky enough to befriend a Japanese lady living in New Zealand at the time, and I'm still friends with her today on Facebook, believe it or not. And she really inspired me and helped me with a lot of the stuff. And I knew there was no dojo here, and I knew that if I was going to learn Kyudo, I'd have to figure out myself. So I remember scrapping all my money together and at that time, I mean, it was really expensive to at least get a bow, a few arrows and a glove and everything. And at that stage, I kind of relied on this person to help me. I got books on the mat and that. So my first introduction to Kyudo or studying or learning Kyudo was through anything I could find on the internet, books and YouTube at the time. So it wasn't as easy as most people when they are able to walk into a dojo and have an instructor sitting there and going, great, this is where we start you, this is what you need, and helping you. It was really difficult for me and at times very frustrating, but I kept at it and I'm thankful I did.
So if someone were in your position and they needed to start from nothing, no equipment, no space, could you talk about how did you go about making it possible? What were the steps? Maybe what are their details and how would you I guess nowadays it's a little easier with like connections being a little more easier through Facebook and all that. But even back then, what did you do? What were the steps that you took to eventually allow you to have a regular practice?
Well, what I actually did is I went to the local archery range and I went and trained at the local archery range. I was eventually lucky enough to find an instructor in Chiba, Japan, and eventually go and have formal instruction for a week in Kyudo and attempt my first grading without any sort of seminar like most of us are used to. On my return after that trip, I just continued practicing. At that stage, I didn't really think of opening up a school or a dojo or anything. Just me being on the field in Kyudo uniform and all of that equipment obviously sparked quite a lot of interest. And people then just started wanting to learn Kyudo. And at that stage, I was, I've just started learning myself. I'm not in the position where I can teach, but I'm a very helpful person. And knowing where I came from and how I struggled to at least be able to help some of these people that would love to give Kyudo a try made me work even harder in saying, hang on, I have something here. Let me put my mind to it and work hard. Let me increase my knowledge. Let me go to Japan as often as I can to help these people and make Kyudo more accessible to people in South Africa.
And so you, at the very beginning, you would have thought, okay, I want to try this. So then you purchased and had equipment shipped to you. And then how did you make a connection with someone in Chiba, with that sensei in Chiba?
So after a while, you make more contacts and you get to know more people. And I actually found a Kyudo stall called Sabu Kyuguten. And at that time, they had just kind of launched an English website. And I started buying Kyudo equipment from them, and then through contact with them, actually managed to find out that you could actually go there and study at the local dojo there with a sensei. From there, that's how I made contact with the dojo there, and eventually was able to go to Japan and train for 2 weeks there.
Oh, wow. So that's so interesting. Like normally people, they look for some way, some sensei to help them and they practice. But in this case, you just wanted to practice Kyudo. You found a equipment shop because you needed the equipment. And then through the equipment shop, you got connected to a sensei that allowed you to then go practice in a dojo?
That's correct.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's so interesting.
It's hard for us South Africans. We're on the other side of the world, and we are a third world country, and we grow up being taught if nothing's easy for us. If you really want to do something and you have a passion for something, boy, you work for it. And I knew it wasn't going to come easy for me. I wasn't going to walk into the local dojo, or even if I lived in the UK, I mean, they've had a dojo there for quite some time now. And so same in Germany in that. I didn't have those opportunities. So I had to work 3 times harder than anybody else to achieve my goal, which was just to learn Kyudo, not to teach, not to have a dojo, just to learn and study Kyudo.
And we all know that it's a lot easier to have that motivation and to up your own game if you had others with you. So when these other people started saying, okay, I wanted to practice, and then you're like, okay, I need to be able to support this because this is something I want to do too. How did that work? How did you get more people to practice if they needed also space and equipment and instruction?
So at that stage, I'd already kind of been through all of that. So I already had the contacts. I already knew the people. I learned a little bit more about how the equipment works and that. When someone walks into the dojo and they see all of this equipment and it's time for them to order equipment, gulp, it's daunting. And it's not only the expense of it, but it's like, how strong is the bow? How high is the bow? What kind of arrows and that? So I kind of learned all that and was able to help these people figure that out and work with them. Same with kind of the instruction that I had got, the simple 8 stages of shooting. And whatever I learned at that stage, I was able just to pass on, just to make it easier for those who wanted to study Kyudo. And I was just in a better position at that time to support them with the kind of knowledge that I had.
So the start of Kyudo also coincided with the start of your kind of independent life, as you were talking about. Could you talk about how those 2 things were evolving together as you were growing up? What were things that you were doing that were helping each other? And also, what did you have to trade off in to be able to continue your practice?
It was actually easy for me to balance my martial arts side of my life. Look, everybody that knows me knows that I am passionate about the Japanese martial arts, and it is entrenched. It is me. It's what makes Jade Jade. So I kind of built my life around my martial arts, not the other way around. So I knew that these were my practice days. So if I get a job, it's got to be in this area where I can get to class on time, and it's got to be able to help me pay for my classes and that. So as a youngster, I built my life around my martial arts. One of the most obviously difficult things is, being a youngster and starting your first job was the money aspect. And we all understand that Kyudo is rather expensive compared to any other martial art, just from the equipment and the time. And for instance, like me, having to go overseas to Japan and train. And that money wasn't always there. So I did my best to save as much money as I could and work in extra jobs to support my passion, which was both karate and Kyudo at that stage.
This is kind of like the beginning of your Kyudo journey. You've been doing karate a long time. When did you see it kind of, most of the time it's like slow, 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 and then suddenly it ramps up. When did you see this becoming something that, okay, it's, I don't know if you consider it as important as your karate, but become another one of these pillars of your life?
I was a sub instructor and I was teaching classes as well. And I was being groomed by my then sensei to eventually take over his school. He was slowly getting older and losing interest and wanted to try something different. And he had been grooming me to take over that role. And yes, what actually happened is it didn't end up so well as we thought. I did start enjoying my Kyudo training and practice a little bit more. And I eventually started training more with my Kyudo, which actually, you kind of sit down and you have all of these passions, but you got to eventually just sit down and say, you know what, I can only do one or two at a time. I can't do four at a time. At that stage, I was also dabbling in Kendo as well. And actually forced me to sit down and say, you know what, Kyudo is where I want to go and where I want to move to. And that kind of changed from there.
Was that a long thinking process? How did you make that decision? What were the things about Kyudo or karate or Kendo that made you choose one and drop the others?
Whew, that's a difficult one. That's it. If I could, I would have loved to have studied and continue with my study with all of them. But you got to be realistic. You're working, you have family commitments, and you are eventually forced to pick one. I mean, I remember my one instructor saying the one day that, how did he say? It's better to be, can't remember how he said it. Basically, better to be a master at one than a master at many kind of speech, and that kind of made me click to think, you know what, Kyudo is on its own multifaceted. It's very difficult. It's very different. And if I'm going to do it, I need to do it properly. And I need to have my focus just on my Kyudo. And I kind of turned around, my karate was still important to me and I still continue it, but I continue it because it's good for my mind, it's good for my body, it's good for my soul. I actually enjoy more the teaching aspect. I teach all the youngsters than the actual training itself. And yes.
Okay, so let's get into the story of the dojo, because I think when we were listening, when I talked to Hoff Sensei, how he built the dojo, we were like, wow, that's a big accomplishment. That's something that everyone dreams of. And then hearing your story that you did the same thing, we're like, what? We can actually do something like this. So I would love to hear how that even became a glimmer in your mind that something like that was possible. And then the whole journey of actually doing that, actually creating, building your dojo, constructing it from the ground up.
Yes, so first starting my little Kyudo group, if we can call it that, I lived in a small little cottage, and at the back of that cottage, there was a large piece of ground which was owned by the people that I rented from. And at that stage, I had asked them if we could utilize that land for the Japanese archery and had a whole meeting with them and built something really small. With the kind of money that I had, it was really something small, and I all did it with my hands. And it was basically, what, I don't have money to pay for the rent, but I will look after the land. I'll mow the lawn, I'll cut the trees and landscape if you let me use that piece of land. And that was in 2010. It was a tiny dojo. We could only fit 3 people shooting at a time, and the land was in a funny kind of shape. So it wasn't like a beautiful straight piece of land where you could shoot straight. There were tree stumps in the way and that. And I had a lot of people wanting to join Kyudo and come. And at that stage, when they saw the beauty of Kyudo, and then they saw us training in this little rickety old place that I managed to kind of look, it was beautiful, but it was not what people see on TV and on YouTube and that. And I always just thought, we have such a good opportunity to grow Kyudo here. Imagine if we actually had a proper, beautiful dojo with enough space that was properly covered. I mean, we had a shade net, and when it rained, we'd have to grab all the equipment and run and go put it in the house. And it was really important that I have a home for Kyudo and to be able to give it the chance to grow. So we decided to start looking at a dojo and that, and it's, I don't know, it all just happened. So in 2011, I met my partner, who I'm still with today. And this particular person knew how the martial arts were my passion, my soul, and how important this was to me. And we were lucky enough that I had this person to say, look, you have this beautiful thing called Kyudo and this beautiful opportunity, but I can see you want a place, a proper place or home for it to be able to make it grow. So we started talking and thinking about it and started planning. And again, there's me, nothing came easy to me. If I wanted to do it, I had to really get it done myself and try everything. And I taught karate at a place called the Boskraan Community Center and for many years. And at behind the community center was a beautiful piece of land, which was perfect for a Kyudo show. We secured that land after a year of back and forth working with the city. We secured that piece of land, and what we did, we eventually took all of our personal savings and money and formally built the Kyudo, what you see today, privately funded by myself and my partner, with the intention, as per the contract, to eventually donate that structure, that dojo, to the city and to the South African Kyudo Renmei.
So I would love to hear the details in actually doing that, because it sounds like, oh yeah, I just decided to build it. I put some money in and it's built, but there's so much behind that I'm just curious myself. Like, do you set up the permits? How do you, if you don't have experience with construction, how do you figure out what materials you need? Do you have like an architect helping you? Do you have someone doing electricity, plumbing, or I don't know, probably none of that, but just what are those details into getting something constructed?
I think I'm lucky enough that I'm very hands-on, I'm very technical. I mean, I'm really good with my hands. I can build something with woodwork, I can lay bricks. I've just naturally been able to, I could have actually, if I lived in Japan or Europe, I would have probably ended up being a really good artisan in either woodwork or something along those lines. So look, I was young, I was inexperienced. It was a huge learning curve. And the only way I learned was from other people and working with other people to try and get my help in understanding these certain things. And the only way you did was getting out there, going to the city, meeting with the people, saying, this is an idea we have, this is what we want to do, this is what it looks like. And we were lucky enough to get a lot of support from those people. So yes, it was very difficult. It was, going to the city and figuring out what paperwork you needed, how you do all of this. Eventually, you start meeting other people and people that are going to help you and support you. So to be honest with you, as much as I did a lot of the hard work on my own, I have to thank a lot of the people who actually saw my idea and my vision as being incredible and actually worked and helped with me, people within the city. With regards to the construction of the dojo, we barely had enough money just to actually build the physical structure itself. There was no way that we were going to go and get some big, huge construction company with guys to come and help us. There was just no way. And it's weird how things, I always have this mantra in my life is don't worry, Jade. Things always have a way of working themselves out. Things just over time start slotting in. My second student at that little old rackety dojo that I started off with just so happened to be a really good, well-known architect from a wealthy family. And he helped us. My partner and I are very good with drawing and design. We studied what dojos look like all around the world, and we kind of came up with, well, this is going to suit our budget and the land and everything. And hey, we've got a student, he's an architect, you can draw it up for us and you can now get it signed off by the city and help us with that. So it's just weird how you started just having these contacts around you. Because we didn't have the money to get a huge contractor in, I had to do it myself. So I quit my job. I managed to get a hold of 3 workers, which were just basically, they were really good, old guys, artisans, hard workers, and it was 3 guys and myself for entire building that dojo with our own hands. So I can tell you, to walk into a structure and go teach there and grow it, and to know every single hole in the ground, every single brick, where every single wire is, an incredible thing. Because I dug the holes, poured the concrete, and laid the bricks with those guys for a year to build that dojo.
What are some stories behind the space? Like you can walk through it. Maybe some places were a little harder than others. Some places, oh, you remember this accident where you had to fix. Are there any stories around different parts of that dojo that you can remember?
I can remember the first thing is when we broke land, we got a TLB, a bulldozer out to start breaking up the land and to start leveling the land. And you walk there and you're like, okay, well, how difficult is it going to be to level out this much land? Well, that was quite an interesting learning curve. And I can tell you, when you walk to a building site and you see these guys with these big poles and these binoculars and they're lining up all of this land to try and get it level, you really appreciate the work that they do. And the funny story is, we're sitting there, we are telling this bull driver, drive here, move this sand there, move that there, and we still couldn't get it level. Eventually, one of the guys that was helping us with the steel work managed to come on site, because I had a meeting with him on site so he could actually come and visit the site. He was like, what are you guys doing? And I said, we're trying to level out the land before you come to put up this main steel structure. And he just giggled at us because we were doing it so badly and we weren't getting, it was still at an angle. No matter how much sand we moved, it still ended up at an angle. And he said, look, let me help you. I've done this before. And the next day he was there with another guy and he had all of these, I don't know what they call them, but I mean, you got these huge rulers and he's got binoculars and he's laying out the land and then he's screaming at the bulldozer guy where to go and move the soil around. And what took us 2 days to totally muck up, he fixed within the day. We came back there and he had built up the one side higher and dug in the other side lower, and the land was level, ready for him the next day to come and start putting in the steel work for the main structure. So again, it's all these funny small little stories and learning curves, and again, the support and help from people is very important.
One of the things that really makes us go wow when we see a Kyudo dojo is a lot of how it's laid out and then the aesthetics, the materials that are used. And I'm sure that in any type of endeavor like this, there's going to be a trade-off between price and aesthetics. Were there any difficult decisions you had to make in terms of choosing one over the other?
Well, I always say this is the family curse that I get from my mom. To give you an example, I'll be walking in a shopping center and I'll see this wonderful item and I'll go, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And I'll look at the price tag and I'm like, okay, well, no wonder you liked it, And when you're looking at designing structure, you look at places like Japan and you look around the world. Obviously Japan is because it's a Japanese dojo, and you want those same kind of beautiful wood finishes and wooden flooring. And in South Africa, we don't build that way. Our building is bricks and concrete, and wood for us is extremely expensive. So you've got to kind of say, well, you know what, I love the way the Japanese build a structure where the main structure is wood and the paneling is wood, but that's not realistic. Our dojo is going to have to be concrete and brick, and the roof is going to have to be a IBR tin sheet roofing with bubble insulation. We can't have beautiful tiles and beautiful shaped roofs. So the whole process of trying to get that simplistic, beautiful Japanese aesthetic with the kind of building materials we had was kind of daunting. But it's strange, we somehow managed it. And again, I'm very thankful to the people in my life and the people that I've met through my Kyudo. For instance, in my dojo, we have the most beautiful parquet flooring put in there. And for at least 4 years, we were training on flat concrete. There was no way we could afford a beautiful wooden floor like that. Also, I had to make the decision between those beautiful big stacker doors or a wooden floor. It had to be the stacker doors. You had to compromise. one of my students, who's now become actually a family friend, is in construction, and they were demolishing an old beautiful house that had parquet flooring, and they donated that flooring and paid for the installation of that flooring to their dojo. So as much as I like to say, you know what, I gave up a year of my work life to build that Kyudo dojo, everybody that could put something into that dojo to make it, because it was their home. I mean, a lot of students helped and put a lot of stuff in, which was really incredible.
I can imagine so many great memories in just the building of it and contributing the materials and the effort it takes. Could you talk about any especially memorable experiences inside the dojo, like the using of it? Was there invited guests there? Other major points in time that really stick out for that dojo?
You know what? I've been in the States for a year now, and I really do miss my dojo. And the one main thing that I do miss is little Saturday afternoon tea times. And we kind of got that, we'll call it now, a little cute little tradition we had from going to Japan every year and training at their small dojos. You would go in, you would train, some lady will bring biscuits, another lady would be making the tea, and you would shoot for 2 hours, have a nice cup of tea and a few biscuits, and all sit around a table and talk. And we kind of imported, I thought it was important to bring that from Japan to our dojo. Those moments of training for 2 solid hours, everyone getting together, someone brought biscuits, someone brought cake, I was making the tea, and just sitting down and joking and laughing and talking about Kyudo and things like that. Those moments I kind of miss with my students. It's the simple things in life that you miss when you don't have that. You know, it's not all of these big, crazy, amazing things that you see out there. It's just the simple, beautiful things that you miss. Teaching people is an incredible experience, because through the teaching, you experience so much with those people. What can I say? You're walking next to them throughout the whole journey, and you're seeing the positive and the negative aspects. And you know what? If I look back now at all my individual experiences with people, a lot was through just teaching Kyudo and all of the funny stories. I mean, we went to Japan every single year eventually we went to the Asia Oceania seminars. And I tell you, we always went as a group. And the stories that I have from all of those international little Kyudo trips, some really incredible funny stories that I'll never forget, that to this day we still sit at the dojo on a Saturday morning laughing about what Bibi did 4 years ago. You know. And what was important for me is when we had new students joining, is to sit and tell those stories with those people there, so those people could have an understanding that we're actually a big family, and we're in this together, and we're learning Kyudo together and experiencing a lot of cool things in life through Kyudo.
Are there any of those stories you can share with us right now?
Yes, there is. So in 2014, the IKYF had sent out details on their website about the third Asia Oceania seminar. And at this stage, we had only been twice to Japan. And in those 2 times, we had gone to the little dojo in Chiba and spent a few days training under Ino Sensei. And then going to the local prefecture of Shinsa, and you know, we're the only Westerners there, everything's in Japanese, and it's like, okay, great, there we go, do your Shinsa, pass, fail, you find out afterwards. So when the IKF sent out these details, I contacted them. I said, look, you know, my name is Jade, I'm from South Africa, we have a group of 10 people doing Kyudo. We've been to Japan twice. I've graded. Some of my other students are graded. Would you be willing to let us join you? And at that stage, it was kind of difficult where to place us, because Asia Oceania was New Zealand, Australia, Taiwan. They were their own little group. So where to put Africa? There's no Kyudo in Africa. So we were lucky enough to actually be incorporated into the Asia Oceania group with New Zealand, Australia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and so on. And we spent that entire year working on tie-high, on technique and everything. I pushed my students, I dedicated my students. I thought to myself, you know what, This is our shot. This is to rock up in Japan, say, hi, we're South Africa. South Africa does Kyudo, and this is who we are. And I was under a lot of pressure to make sure that people didn't look at us and go, oh my God, people from South Africa, I was a very proud person. So I remember us landing in Nagoya. The next day, we had to go to the main Budokan to go and register. I was both excited and at the same time terrified, because this is your first impression. We had worked incredibly hard. I had worked hard. I've been then trying to get South Africa recognized as a country that actually practices proper Kyudo. And so here we go. We in our uniforms, we got our bows, we got everything. We're walking to the main Budokan on the first day to go and register. And I stop all of my students in front of the Budokan and I huddle them together and I said, right, guys, first impressions last. We're the new kids on the block. We have to go in there with a positive attitude. We have to work 20 times harder than anyone. And you guys need to make me proud. Please, I put a lot of work into this. So shame they could see that, I was a bit beside myself and nervous, because being kind of if I can call myself at that stage an instructor and still studying Kyudo, it was a lot on me, because not only did I have to perform, but I had to ensure that all my students perform as well. So it was a lot of pressure. So we walked to the Kyu dojo and the little sliding door opens and there's a little sensei sitting there behind a desk, and he stands up and he hurries us in. And my one student, bless her soul, gets all, frazzled. Oh my gosh, he's telling me to come. And she walks straight into the main dojo with her shoes on. Tell you, he was like right there and then going, no, dame, no. And she's sitting there like, what did I do? And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, if the earth could just swallow me up whole now. I was dying inside. Like, here's our first impression, the silly South Africans, we're just going to walk through the dojo with our shoes on. And, there I wasn't really impressed, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hope no one saw that. But looking back at it now, to where we came from to where we are now, I can actually still tell that story today and have a big laugh about it,
So after something like that, I'm guessing like the rest of the trip went totally smooth?
That trip was incredible. We did so well on that trip. First of all, this was a new experience to us. We had to train ourselves and work with ourselves and rely on the 3 weeks we spent in Japan to go and do anything with. That's what we had to work with, And I remember sitting by the door, and on the first day of seminar, the sensei wanted to call all the individual groups in and just check. How much do they know? What do they know? And I'm sitting there by the door shaking. I've got my camera there, and I've got someone's taking a video, and the South Africans are now they're going through the door. They're doing tahai. And I sat there and with a big smile on my face. They did incredibly well. And I remember the sensei turning around, looking at each other and nodding, as if to say, wow, not so bad. We didn't expect that. And I remember people from other countries going, that was incredible. This is your first time and you guys actually did well. And all of my students passed their shodan. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All 6 students passed their shodan first time on that trip. The very first trip we made under the IKY seminars. It's an open grade, you kind of get what you deserve on that day. And for us, for all of my students to get their first day and first try was a very proud moment. And that's the one thing that's important to me. It's not whether I do Kyudo well as Jade, or whether I hit the target, or whether I get my 5th dan. What's most important is when I teach people Kyudo and they go and they do well. That for me is what makes my Kyudo.
Mm-hmm. What an amazing first impression for South Africa. What would you say would be the next kind of step up that's really bringing this part of the world, this country, into more of this international Kyudo stage?
Yeah, so after that, we continued going to Japan every year, to grade up, and from there turned my focus onto the South African Kyudo Federation, forming it and putting all those policies and documents into place and making our Kyudo formal in South Africa and a proper organization. And from there, I turned my focus towards that. And for me at that stage was to be recognized as a member nation of the IKYF. And that's where I still had my goals of growing the dojo, of teaching Kyudo to more South Africans, to going to Japan and grading. But at that stage, yes, becoming a member nation of the IKYF became very important to me.
Tell us about that journey of becoming a full member. What were the requirements? What were things that you had to do to make this a possibility?
It was very difficult and at times very frustrating because it was about time and patience. So I turned my focus towards making the South African Kyudo Federation a proper organization and growing that organization within South Africa and also making it recognized around the world. I wanted other Kyudo nations and Japan, most importantly, to realize that we are serious about our Kyudo. We want to grow this. We want more schools. We want to go to Japan as often as we can, and we want to get our members highly graded, Godan and up. And I can be a little bit impatient. So the thing was, it was basically time. And it was quite, again, another learning curve. I mean, what did I know about making a federation? And it was thanks to a lot of people that I met over the years from other countries, Kyudo and professors from universities in South Africa that were au fait with organizations and federations and the legalities behind stuff like that. And I relied on a lot of those people for guidance on how to create a federation, how to affiliate it to all these other interesting bodies, and how to make it be a professional organization. And again, a frustrating learning curve because, I never had that experience. So yeah, it was difficult. It wasn't easy. With regards to IKYF, they could see that I was really adamant and I was really focused on having South Africa federated and become a member nation. And I did kind of push for the answers on, great, how do we go about doing this? I have a federation, we have a number of dojo, we go to Japan every year, we have graded members, and I just was brushed off constantly as if to say, you've got to be patient. It takes time. These things don't just happen overnight. And I had to slowly accept that and just continue working on growing the numbers of students, going to Japan, getting graded members, and most importantly, also growing the number of dojos.
How did you go about doing that? You were the only instructor for a long period of time. You could just control yourself, your timing. You could go to the dojo all the time. How would you get more than one dojo started?
The people around me very quickly figured out that Kyudo takes a lot of time, and you've got to be truly passionate about it. And you've got to be willing to give a lot of yourself to make it happen. And I didn't have the luxury of people jumping up to me and saying, Jade, I want to actually be an instructor. I want to start a dojo down here. I never had that. And as much as I try to push certain members in that direction, they knew how difficult it was and what I had gone through. And they were quite ready to kind of do what I've done and make those sacrifices. And it was, again, all on me. The only way I could open up other dojos is going and finding a space and going there myself on a Saturday or a Sunday to go and teach. And going to Cape Town and eventually finding some few groups interested in studying it, and then still kind of being the instructor and traveling to and from to go and help them. So it was kind of like I was on my own when it came to things like that. And it was very difficult, very frustrating. But you know what? I look back at it today and I'm very thankful because I have a group in Cape Town and I started that group. And I mentored that group. And this is the one thing. Last year, For the last 3 years, my partner and I knew we were immigrating to the United States, and it was really important to me that Kyudo continue in South Africa. And I kind of, in a way, had to force people to understand that I'm leaving South Africa, that things have got to continue, and there's only so much I can help from America. You've got to stand on your own 2 feet. And from there, I was lucky enough to have my students step up to the plate and say, right, we're going to continue with Kyudo in South Africa. We know you're leaving. We know you're part of the dojo. You'll still continue to be a part of the dojo, but we got to step up. And over those 3 years, I worked with those close students of mine to kind of take over the baton and start opening their own dojos and running their own classes. But at first, it never happened. I had to do it all on my own.
So we covered a lot of stuff, but there's still a lot that we haven't gotten to, but we're approaching time so I hope you'd be willing to have a second conversation sometime in the future. But for now, I want to get into the rapid fire questions just to get to know you a little bit better, something more fun. The first one would be, do you have a quote or a proverb that you live by or practice by?
Basically, after victory, tighten your helmet cords. And just quickly, when you get over the first hurdle, there's another one there, and it never stops.
Where did you hear that from?
I think I was reading a Japanese book on samurai, and there was some famous samurai. I can't really remember the particulars about it, but that was his particular saying. And that one just stuck to me, just to basically say, you know what, when you think it's over, it ain't over. And that stuck with me through all these years.
Are you a dog person or a cat person, and why?
I'm actually both a dog and a cat person. I love the personality of a dog, that happy-go-lucky, always positive, happy, loving energy. But I also like the cat energy, where there's that I can stand on my own 2 feet, I'm my own person.
What is your comfort food?
I'm a big foodie. What's my comfort food? Egg fried rice, I got to be honest with you. Something about it.
If someone were to open up your YouTube homepage, YouTube has this engine that automatically shows you videos based on what you've watched before. What are these videos that people are looking at? Okay, this is the stuff that Jade is interested in.
They're going to see 2 things. Everything's going to be Kyudo related. And the second thing is German Oompa or accordion music. I play the accordion, and I'm still starting to play the accordion. So I often go onto YouTube to listen to a song that I'm learning so that I can understand the timing and the kind of jingle, the tune.
So thank you so much for taking your time, sharing your story. There's still so much to cover, and I hope you'd be willing to have a future interview again. But is there anything that you want to close off this session with? Anything you want to say to the audience, or something that you just want to share in closing?
I just want to say to people that if you're passionate about something and you love something and it's important to you, that no matter how hard things are and no matter what obstacles in front of you, you just keep trying. Because I can promise you that one day, I don't know, when you're older, when you look back, you will forget about those obstacles and you'll look at the incredible things in life that you achieve. I think that's very important. Just no matter how hard it is and whatever life puts in front of you, just keep at it. It's worth it in the end.
Thank you. And it's very clear that you live by something like that too, and what you've been able to accomplish. So yeah, thank you so much.
I just laugh because I was listening to various of your other podcasts with everybody, most of the people that I actually know. And the one thing that I said to myself is, Jay, don't waffle on. Just be precise and clear. So I hope with what I gave you can work with. And it was kind of precise and clear. And I hope I didn't waffle on.
Well, I think that part of it is just your personality. That's what we want to share. I don't want like robots just lecturing everyone. So I think it was great. I love the way that you spoke about things. You really showed that how much you cared about these particular events in your life. And that's what I want to get through in these podcasts. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks.
So I'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Ciao. Bye.
Good day. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode because we have a lot more exciting conversations to share as we explore the world of the traditional Japanese martial arts. The Inside Look podcast is available on most common podcasting platforms and on YouTube. Remember to subscribe to not miss out on new interviews as they are posted. We're always looking for feedback to improve, so please write us a review or drop us a line at podcast@tokushikai.ca or on Facebook and Instagram at tokushikai.canada. Until next time, thanks for listening.